Okay, good evening. Hello. It's so great to have you guys here. My name is Salendra. I am the course manager of Campus, of the International Mediation Campus. It's so lovely to have these monthly webinars, and feel free to follow us on LinkedIn, where you'll also see them, and on our website, etc. I thought I'll give you a very brief introduction to the International Mediation Campus. I know some of you have already gone through the training, so I will not go into much detail, but just a brief introduction. So the International Mediation Campus is actually part of Consensus Group, and we are one of the globally leading mediation trainings. We provide international mediation training that is certified by the IMI and SIMI, and also university certified by the International School of Management. And our trainings are actually composed out in two different formats. So we have the 10-week training course, which happens twice a week for 2 hours, and then the more kind of dense and, as the name says already, intensive training that is a full week of morning till evening training. And actually at the moment we have both of our trainings live and running. So yeah, it's always so exciting to have so many new faces in our network. And it's great to have these webinars and to also kind of create a space for discussion all around mediation and ADR in connection with various other topics. As we know, it is an interdisciplinary field, and that's also why it is so diverse. And we really appreciate also various backgrounds and perspectives on mediation. That's why all our trainers come from various different backgrounds and professional backgrounds, being, family mediation or more humanitarian international mediation, all to commercial mediation. And also our trainers being from more than, I think, 80 countries around the world. Similar to our participants, of course, on the trainer side and on the participant side, we want to create a diverse training and learning atmosphere, because that's what international mediation is all about at the end of the day. And in that light, we also have these webinars where we want to get together with like-minded people that are fascinated in the field, create a space where you guys can learn and learn with us from experts like today with Katrin. Without further ado, I will hand over to our speaker of tonight. We are so happy to have her. And Katrin Koine, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'm really happy to have so many nations here, so many people of different ages and different calibers, as I assume. So let's have a wonderful discussion and a good exchange. I invite you already to be lively, to share your thoughts and comments with me, because we all know much more than only me. My name is, again, Katrin Koine, and I'm based in Germany. I live between Cologne and Frankfurt area on a farmhouse where I have a beautiful seminar room that I can hold even mediations and coachings and all kinds of other things in, which I'm really fortunate about. My background is in expressive arts, coaching and consulting. It's a mouthful. It's an approach and a philosophy after Paulo Knill. He was a Swiss psychologist and musician who, together with other artists, developed an arts-based method to help people develop their skills and adequate lifestyle, etc. And so I'm combining this expressive arts approach with mediation, because I learned and trained at the IM campus. I'm really happy about that. And now I'm back, as an expert speaking about my work. So thank you for this wonderful opportunity of being here tonight. You will see the following of what we're doing. Let me share my screen and give you a little agenda and outlook of what I want to do with you tonight. We're going to talk about the use of creative processes in mediation And in order to start with the first input, I'm going to give you a little example. I will tell a story about one of the recent mediations that I've accompanied between a boss and her employee at a science institute, both of them researchers and scientists. And I will enlighten the conflict for you a little bit and then talk about what I did, what kind of arts process I did, and what effect it had. Then I will give you a little bit of theory and background as to working with art making, because I think, working with the arts is a big stretch. A lot of people understand something with that, but I want to really make sure that my approach and the things I'm basing my work on, the theory and practice, I can give you a little insight into that, which will make sense after you've seen the example. And then I want to finish with another example, a so-called team mediation that happened a few years ago in a rehab center for women between the CEO of the clinic and her team. In total, there were many different things going on. And what I did with them, with a different kind of art making. Because this is the beauty of my approach. I'm working with every different art discipline that exists, from visual arts, through movement, through theater, through music making, and even poetry as, language in art making. And depending on the topic or on, the situation I have, I will choose and design the processes accordingly and see what fits the situation the best. Let me begin with story of the example between the boss and her employee at the Science Institute. I was called because there was an ongoing conflict. Oh, I want to say one thing. The mediations I'm doing are mostly team mediations and mediations within companies, within people. That's the main focus. I don't do a lot of commercial things. I question, and maybe we could have a discussion about it, if arts-based methods could be helpful in these contexts. But today I will just refer to team and inter-people mediation in terms of, working relationships. We have the situation that we have a group leader. She leads a research group at a science institute, acquires her own fundings, sets up, the projects in the broadest sense, and then she hires researchers of different levels in expertise to carry out the projects and also to bring in new ideas. And she had hired a so-called postdoc, a pretty advanced researcher who was still under her contract, so under her advisory, but also under her funding, so not completely independent, but in terms of research and research idea creation, pretty independent. And so the conflict was based on communication issues. The two of them had different ideas of how to collaborate, how many ideas should be shared on both sides, how transparent should they be in communication. And the postdoc had the feeling that her content and her ideas were not used in a confidential way. And the boss had the idea that she wasn't really clear what her postdoc was doing, that, the project design and the direction that the postdoc was taking, and she required more transparency. So, of course, a conundrum. One person wanting transparency, the other being afraid of it. And so after, in our first mediation session, after I had individual sessions with them equally to kind of enlighten the conflict and see their different perspectives, I started a joint session. And after their goal setting and what they wanted to achieve in this mediation today, I let them do an artwork together. And here's what I said. I said, before we go into all of this talking, about what is the situation and what are the different positions and the interest and enlightening everything that's here, why don't we engage in a creative process without words to just see what happens when the two of you are doing something together? And I will not judge this. I will not make a statement about it. It's just for us kind of an opening frame to get going into the process and to create something together, and based on that, see what happens and what emerges. And somehow I could gain their curiosity. So they were all pins and needles, and I spilled out on a big paper, on a big table, building blocks. We call them, I think it's a Swedish brand. We call them Kapla building blocks. They are small and have the same length. And, there are many. And so the only assignment was Now I want you, please, to create and to you aesthetically pleasing structure, 3D, a sculpture. And you're not allowed to use words in order to coordinate your process. And because they're researchers and they're curious by nature and they want to know by nature, they started to kind of, the postdoc started to build things and arrange and do. And interestingly, the CEO stood by for the longest time, the group leader, and looked at what she was doing. Didn't do anything, didn't come in for the longest time. And I thought, wow, she's now building all by herself. So what do we do? After a while, she started to build a little bit, kind of adding to what the postdoc had done. And then I said, okay, so let's make a little pause here and let's reflect. What's happening? Postdoc is working. You are watching. What is missing? Well, a language is missing. I can't really speak. Okay, yes, that was a restriction. So let's add language now. And here's what happens. The group leader started to comment on her way of building. She started to say, well, if you build like this, the stability of the building blocks are in that angle, not, 100% stable, only 50%. And if you keep going and, build the wall like that, it's not going to last for long. And the postdoc was irritated by that, but kept on building, kept on integrating her suggestions. And after a while, she would start her own little process, her own little building. And in the end, I'll share with you what emerged. A really interesting structure that looked like this. So you can see it has many different aesthetic expressions, so to say. It looks like a rectangular structure, a round structure. The walls are differently high, and there is some sort of a pathway with poles that you could maybe walk underneath or something like that. And after a while, they had created that and they were done with their creation. And I said, okay, so shall we leave it at that? And then we started to look at it, and here's one of the keys that I want you to remember, to look at it phenomenologically, meaning we were just describing the phenomenon that had emerged. And here is what we started to describe. Well, it looks like a house with 2 private rooms, or it could be some sort of other building structure. It has a round side that seems very stable and symmetric, and it has a rectangular side that has an opening, but the opening is covered up with a little kind of roof partly. It has symmetry, and it also appears asymmetric in certain points. And one thing that's very obvious, the highest point of the whole building is between these 2 rooms. The wall is the highest part of the building. The exit on the one side where, the walkway seems unstable and the end of it is blocked with some blocks on top. You see it to the upper left corner in the upper left picture. And as you can see, as I'm talking about this, the phenomenon of describing it starts to create metaphors. There is a big wall between the 2 rooms. And the wall is the highest point of the whole construction. So, what I'm starting to think, I'm starting to associate, oh my gosh, if these 2 rooms are standing either for them personally, one is one and one is the other, or for their way of cooperating and not being able to bridge their different perspectives and different rooms. So there we go, And so these metaphor collection was already starting to kind of build a little bit more space, a little bit more room of creating perspective towards the conflict. Because as we all know, when these people come to mediation to us, they're so stuck in their own views and so stuck in their own approaches of thinking about the situation that it's the hardest thing for us to really open that up, soften it, and create more perspective, create more play range. And by using these metaphors, we could already sense that, a little bit more space, a little bit more of, a wall can be many things. A wall can be a limit and a boundary of not talking to each other, but it can also be a stabilizing structure that gives orientation to know where a room ends and where it begins. It can be an area for stability. So this is the beauty in metaphoric work. It adds several different, even sometimes contradicting perspectives. And that comes into play when we do art making in these processes. We start also to create tangibility. I don't even know if that's a word, but to make things tangible. And here's how we did that in the second part. Here, I just carry on with my little story. We then described what happened in the process. And that was very interesting because they themselves had to explain what they had experienced in the process and how they viewed the process. And so, of course, the postdoc said, well, you know, I was building in the very beginning and I tried this and then I built back and I started to add and I built back. I tried different things. And then came that comment, you know, or do it like this or like that. And I felt irritated by that. I didn't know what to do. It wasn't a creative process anymore. All of a sudden, it wasn't a play anymore, a tid for tad, a giving and receiving. It became a game that had to be right and correct. And so then the group leader answered, well, you know, for me, it was very difficult to enter the play because I had no idea where this was going. I couldn't really see what you were constructing, and I needed some more direction. And I also needed us to clarify where we wanted to go together. And I wanted to create stability. So here you go. You see that in the enlightenment of collecting these metaphors and describing the processes, what had happened in that mediation is that they created more space to think about their situation, that they added more perspectives towards, you know, what is here. And all of a sudden, we could start to talk about their collaboration and their work together based on this metaphor, based on this building, you know, because that stayed with us for the whole day. It didn't move away. And so we could always go back and refer to that and say, listen, you know, this is exactly what happened in that situation here. Is that familiar to you with when you step outside of here and you work together? You know, do you do similar things or do you do different things? And of course, the relation is very obvious because, you know, I am just a human being and I'm a human being in my workplace and I'm a human being in other situations. I cannot suppress my instincts, my spontaneity, my playful behavior. I can just do that to a certain extent. But in these moments, my behavior becomes visible and tangible. And when we can then talk about it without any judgment and without looking at it from a psychological analysis, it really becomes a playground on which we then can assess with many, many different ideas, our interests, our options, and referring back to that metaphor again and again, helping us, guiding us in the way of enlightening the conflict and finding options. Does that make sense? Just a brief, you know, of course, this is a very shortcut way of explaining to you what happened, but I hope that this gave you a little idea. Now, let me tell you, when I talk about art making, there are a few things that we need to observe when we want to work creatively, because I don't believe that it is good in a mediative process to say, oh, let's, you know, just see if we can maybe draw the conflict or build the conflict or, you know, illustrate it in a way. I believe that art making is there to create spontaneity, to create play. And one side effect, yes, is that we're making things tangible. But another side effect is that we can really start to create new ideas, ideas that are not there through logical linear thinking, but that come through spontaneity and play. And so there are three ingredients that I would like to highlight today in order to understand what I mean with art making. The first one is the philosophy of phenomenology as a basis of understanding how to look at the process and how to look at the product in the end. What do I do when there's the sculpture? How do I put that into the mediation process, right? That's the question. And so I will refer to that, explaining to you a little bit what I understand under phenomenology. The second part is the notion of so-called poiesis. Poiesis is the act of spontaneous creation with what is, following the emergent. And this is something that we as human beings have innate in us. We're born with that. We are creators, you know, it's our makeup, it's our senses, our imagination that we're built with. And children do this throughout all cultures, all nations, everywhere around the world to learn. And so the act of poiesis plays an important role in understanding that art making is possible even for people who say, well, I'm not creative. And the last thing that I want to shed light on is the notion of embodiment. And what I mean with that, embodied consciousness. What is so important to know about this is, I'm going to refer to that later a little bit, but just a little teaser, is that I, as a human being, am not thought alone. You know, the mind-body split that was created by Descartes many, many centuries ago is now, you know, as we know in research, not the basis for thinking anymore. We know that we're holistic beings who are with this vehicle, you know, the whole body in the world, and we're creating knowledge through this whole body. And I will explain to you a little bit more about that later. So let's go to the first part, phenomenology, and why that is so important. And I will go through this with you, and just to make it a little bit more fun, we're going to do short little exercises for it so that you can experience these things, that you can not only logically understand them, but also experience them. So phenomenology is the study of phenomena. And what do we mean by that? We're trying to objectively describe the appearance of things, or things as they appear in our experience. Or another way of putting it is the ways we experience things. That's the meaning things have in our experience. It's a bit complicated, but what it basically means is we're trying to objectively describe what is. The things I see in front of me, the things I feel, the things I notice, and we're not trying to make meaning of it, and we're not trying to conceptualize them in a way that we want to diminish them through language. Now, what do I mean by that? We're gonna do a short little exercise so that really phenomenology becomes tangible to you. Are you willing to do a 6-minute little short thing with me? You don't have to do much. You just have to be willing to stay with me for these 6 minutes and follow through with the process. Yes? So here is what I want to do. I show you in the next slide. The slide doesn't work. Oh yeah, stop sharing. Good. Okay, so here's what I want to do with you. I want to visually, auditively, and kinesthetically experience phenomenology with you through the senses. Every process, the visual, the auditive, and the kinesthetic process, each go for about 2 minutes. And the only thing that you have to do is to sit back, relax, and follow my instructions. Okay? I'm going to put on a timer here on my cell phone that I won't overstep time. So here's what we do. I want you to sit back in your chair, wherever you are, to relax your belly, to put both of your feet on the ground, relax your skeleton, your muscles, your tendons, because through relaxation, we can create concentration. And then I would like you to look around the room, wherever you are, or maybe you're sitting in front of a window like my computer's here and there's a window. And I want you to pick an area that you will stay fixed on with your eyes. It could be the corner of your room. It could be your heating system right in front of you. It doesn't need to be any specific creative area of the room. You just have to pick one area that you will be staying with for the next 2 minutes. Okay? So pick that area now, please. Make it as comfortable as you can so that you don't have to tilt your head in so many ways. And then you look at this area, and here's what you do for 2 minutes with me, beginning now. I want you to look at the phenomenon of what you see, that you start to describe to yourself internally, quietly. What are the lines, the forms, the colors, the materials that you can notice in that little part of your exploration? So you will take time now to fix your eyes on this part in your room, to relax and to look carefully. And of course, you have seen this part of your room a million times and you know exactly what it is and what it looks like. But I want you now to step away from understanding, oh, that's a window sill and a window frame. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested to study the surface of what you're seeing. What are the lines that you can make out? Are they straight? Are they curved? What are the colors that you notice? Can you detect shades, light on that surface? Look carefully, take time. And don't try to make sense of it. Don't try to interpret it or find meaning in it. Just consider the phenomenon. Can you describe in detail the surface? Is it slick, wet, dry, very clean, or a little dusty? Can you see the dust particles on it? Be very, very specific, looking carefully, and even longer. And when you think you have seen everything, start from the beginning again. Stay with it. Don't judge. Look. And you may notice that the longer you look, the more you see. The more you notice that you haven't noticed before. The different shades of color. Oh, and the straight line is bending at a certain point at the frame of the window. So just for 10 more seconds, stay with it, looking phenomenologically. Good, well done. Okay, stop, relax now. The next part is the auditive part, where we use our auditive sense to listen. And for that, I invite you, just as you're sitting relaxed, close your eyes, lean back, and open up your ears. Start to listen to the sounds around you. No matter where you are, how silent it is, there's always a symphony of something going on around you, of sounds and cracks and creaks and crooks. And I want you also here to try to not identify the sound as, oh, this is a car, oh, this is the wind, but to listen to the quality of the sound. Is it loud? Is it soft? Is it high or low? Shrieky, edgy? Does it make your hair stand on your skin, or is it a comfortable sound? So I will be quiet now for the next minute or so, and I want you to just listen without judgment. Listen to the quality very intensely. Stay with it. Open your ears. Listen to the tiniest little sounds. No concept. I'm not interested in understanding what sound it is. I'm interested in hearing the quality of the sound. Good. Keep going. I know it's hard. Open your ears more. Okay, great, wonderful. Well done. And now the last part, for which you can also keep your eyes closed, because then you can concentrate better. The last sense is the kinesthetic sense, your fingers. And here's what I want you to do. With your eyes closed, just pick whatever object you can find handy. Either it's a pen on your table, or it's a surface of your table, or the sides of your chair, or a piece of your clothes that you're wearing. So again, here you decide for one object or one surface that you're going to stay with. And for 2 minutes with me together, beginning now, you will start to explore that object as if you feel it for the very first time in your life. How does it feel like? What is the structure? The lightness or softness of it? What's the temperature? Is it warm or cold? Is it bendable or stiff? What information can you generate through your fingertips? What knowledge can you gain through your hands? Be curious, like a child who feels this for the first time. What does it feel like? Get into the details of it. Don't get bored with, oh yeah, it's a pen, I know what it is like. Go on an exploration. Really sense what that is. The sharp corners, the edges, the stiffness of it, the different material. Stay with it phenomenologically. Good. Stay curious more. And you will see that if you stay with it, you will start to feel more after a while. Our senses get heightened. Good. Great. Okay, thank you. And you can stop that process. Blink your eyes open. And look at me again. So later on in the Q&A session, I would love to hear about your experiences and how was that for you. Let me make a few assumptions. I believe that listening, looking, and feeling, touching, without any concept is not in our nature, is very difficult to do because we're constantly trying to conceptualize, make meaning, create a stability around that. And we're not trained in just staying with what is. But the staying with what is leads to understanding more and more and more, discovering things that we couldn't discover in the first moment because our senses weren't ready for that yet. But the longer we stay with it, the more information we get. The more patient we are with really going into the senses of it, the more metaphors we can create. And so the message of this here is when we work with art making, we should always stay on the surface of these things. We should always objectively try to describe them without going into meaning, into judgment, into associations right away. Because what we want to do, remember, is to go from a stuck emotional situation to a wider play range. And the more we can do that in our language already in the beginning by collecting different kinds of descriptions, different kinds of seeing, hearing, looking, we open up the space and we create more knowledge than could be possible before. And it saves us to not interpret the art making or the art product in the end in a not so helpful way. So dealing with art making on a phenomenological basis. That's kind of the first important thing to notice. Okay, the second part that I wanted to shed light on is the act of poiesis. And we call that the act of creation. It is what human beings have done and always will do, because this is where we come from and this is where we're going. We're interacting with what is. That means with materials, with environment, with other people or other, living beings. And as we do this in the poetic act, we are following the emergent, and we're not trying to achieve a certain goal, but we're just playing for the sake of creating, for developing, for making something. That is poesis. And in a mediative process, if we approach an art making like that, where we're not so interested in the final end product of, it has to look a certain way and it has to do this, but where we're inviting the play, the act of creation into it, we can really bring people into the curiosity of it. And we can really help them to enter that threshold of, okay, well, I'm not so creative. I'm not an art maker, but maybe with this pen, I can doodle around. I can just, do some scribbles and no one will judge me in the end, and then we'll see what happens. So the poetic act is an act of bringing in play and broadening the play range. And it is innate to us as human beings, as I said before. We've been doing this as human beings for a long time. Gosh, time is running very fast. I'm just seeing this. So I'm going to speed up a little bit. I wanted to do a short little process with you concerning poesis, so that you can really experience what a poetic act is. And for that, you just need a random piece of paper that you have handy in front of you. And here's what you do with it. You put it in front of your desk. Again, you close your eyes so that you can really feel your fingers and heighten your senses. And then for a moment, you start to explore this paper with your fingertips. Again, as we've practiced now, on a phenomenological basis. See what you can feel about the edges, about the temperature. My paper here already has certain shapes and certain edges and certain lines on it because I've treated it in a bad way. So it's not very plain anymore. And I can feel that with my fingertips. So start to explore that piece of paper on your table and then see if you can also bend it in a way. And begin to play around with bending and shaping it in ways that are pleasurable to you. And so I will stop doing it because it will do a lot of noise as I'm guiding you through this. But I want you to start folding and bending it and maybe crushing it or ripping it or tearing it, and do something that feels pleasurable to you, that you just feel like, oh, I want to try that. I want to see if I can do this without looking, just with sensing, letting the play emerge. No goal, no nothing. Just explore the material and see what you can do with it. See how you can shape it and form it in a certain way. And if you found a way that you really particularly like, keep doing that and add to it, add other things, so that you have at least 4 different ways of shaping this kind of paper. It could be tearing, it could be rolling, it could be crumbling. Okay, 4 different ways. And once you think you're done with this, you have established that, and you think, oh yeah, that's the 4 different ways, and I don't know what else to do. You can start to open up your eyes and look at what you did. Look, this is what I created in this short little moment. It looks like nothing, but here is an end product of a poetic process. And how we treat it now is through the phenomenological description of what can I see here, what is emerging, what is happening. As you could maybe see as a little side effect, at least for me that happened, I feel a little bit more relaxed now. I feel curious, I feel playful. And so a poetic act has a wonderful side effect, which we can use in mediation a lot. It relaxes people and it brings a sort of joy. That's a big word, but it brings a sort of smile and ease into the room. And that is very tangible, and it's really, really helpful, of course, in these processes. Okay, so art making as a poetic act is the second ingredient that I wanted you to hear about. And the last one is embodiment or embodied consciousness. Mark Johnson and George Lakoff have done substantial work on that. They have created basically the Bible on that. It's called The Philosophy in the Flesh. And it talks about that we as human beings have a body, and the knowledge begins at our fingertips. The thought begins at our fingertips. It doesn't begin here, but the information begins, with the surface of our skin. And even sometimes before consciousness is created, action already occurs because our body knows where action is needed. And I give you a very illustrating example. When you put your hand non-minding on a hot surface, your hand will be pushed away faster than you can consciously think, oh, that was hot. Yeah? The hand goes away faster than that. That means our body has certain knowledge that we cannot always consciously and directly access, but it plays into our behavior, our action. It forms who we are. And through art making, you can access these kinds of knowledge bases and these kinds of knowledge parts. And that then enlightens, of course, critical situations in a much easier way. So I don't want to read through this. You can have this later on, but this is basically why embodiment is so essential in working with art making, and because it gives us more than linear thought. So now going back to where we were in the beginning, giving another quick team mediation example, because we also want to have a little bit of time for a discussion. This mediation happened a few years ago, and it was between, as I said, a CEO and her team working in a rehab clinic. And the team had been in conflict amongst each other, but also with her. They were kind of fighting some of her decisions. They were not really liking her leadership style. Communication wasn't very transparent and clear. It gave lots of different versions of, oh, but I want to handle this and I want to handle that and I want to do it this and that way. So there was a lot going on. And the first thing I did with that team was, of course, to create an agenda and to say, what is it that we want to enlighten here? And then I said, okay, before we do anything, let's first do something here and create something as a team together and see what emerges, because maybe helpful things will emerge. And here's what I did with them. This is why the drums are here. I am, in my first profession, a musical theater actress and an opera singer. So I am very prone to music making and, bringing orchestras together. And so with that team, I created an orchestra. We first did vocabulary building. That means we started to play with rhythm and with clapping and with voice and singing. That's all we had. We had no instruments other than that. And they really went along with it. And in the end, I want to show you what happened, because I have a little recording of the final short little performance that we did of 2 minutes. And now you have to be mindful. What I'm showing you will sound ugly. It's not beautiful, because these are amateur people. They usually don't make music. But what I want you to listen for is when things come together, when they start to merge into one music piece, when, the different kind of groups start to align with each other. And that's a magical moment, and it requires a lot of different things. And so here is where it is. So slowly they're coming together. There you go. You got it? Yes. And then there were solos. Listen for that. Okay, fast forward a little bit. Okay, and so on. You can hear that through the different roles that these people were taking in order to create an orchestra, how difficult it is, first of all, to really bring it together so that no one is interjecting it by their own sound, but to kind of integrate into it, and that at the same time to give room for solos. And based on this experience, we could so easily talk about which role does everyone want to have in the team? Why is it for some people so important to have a solo? And how does the solo need to be in order to really fit into the frame and not, explode the frame? And based on that metaphor, we could really spend half of the day to enlighten a lot of the conflict. And later on, when we then would go to the real description of, what is happening, we had already many, many resources created and many options also to deal with it. And so with that, I want to leave you. I think that art making and creative processes in mediation help to make emotions and the difficult parts tangible, feelable, experientiable in the room, so that we can start to talk about it. And because we're in the realm of metaphor, it's never judgmental, it's never confrontational, and it really gives us options for solution. And so with that, I'm really all pins and needles to hear your opinion now and to hear what you want to say and your comments on it, your questions, and what you think about that. Let's open the discussion, huh, Sailendra?
Yes, please, let's do so. We have like 5-6 minutes more. I didn't read there, it says iPhone in the chat. Feel free to also, turn on your camera and your microphone. I think it's great to also have your question audible. Otherwise, I'm happy to read it out loud. How do you work with resistance and rejection? I think in the sense of not being too evaluative.
So you mean when I'm offering something like that and there's people like, oh, no, I don't do that. No, that's not me. Yeah. Well, you have to do many things in order to avoid that. The one thing first is that you as a person have to believe and have to really stand in for these projects and processes. And I, as a person, am convinced, because I'm a musician and an artist myself, I know the effects of it, so I can really sell them and I can stand in for them. People feel that. If you have doubt yourself, don't do it, because it won't work. But if you feel like, yes, there's value in it, and I really understand what I'm doing, then we have to offer it in a non-confrontational way or in a playful way. And we have to put it into context. That means people will say in the very beginning, oh, but that's really no, I'm not creative. And so there are different options of how to deal with it. You can give them a rationale of explaining why it's beneficial to use creative methods like that and the effect it has. And then you invite them to just for a certain amount of time, try it out with you together, with, the people in the room. Limit the time, say 20 minutes or 10 minutes. We're just going to do something different to open up our brains and to get, a little bit of fresh air into here. If people still don't want to do it, by then you have 90% of the crowd with you. Usually I do. If you then still have doubts, you can always assign different roles. Not everyone has to create with it, but they can also take the role of an observer, a phenomenological observer, who then gives feedback of what they observed. How did the process occur? What do they see in the final end product? What is the phenomenon that they can see and describe? So by giving different options to people how to engage in the process, they're still engaged in the process and they're still witnessing it, just from different perspectives. And so, as a quick fix, these are 3 things that you could do, when resistance comes up. And actually, in my school of thought, I want to say that we're not thinking about resistance and we're not labeling it resistance, because that would assume that there's a right way of doing things. And I don't believe that. I think what I'm offering is an option. And when we start to engage in the play and the game of it, there is no right or wrong. There is nothing to achieve other than engaging in the process. And if people understand that, a lot of weight falls off their shoulders and they're like, oh, okay, doodling and doing something, that's not so perfect in the end, I can do that. Yeah, that's fine. If they understand the rationale of why we want to do it, what the benefit of that is. Sorry, that was a long answer.
Great though. Ravi, I saw you also had a question in the chat. Would you want to maybe say it out loud and ask Catherine directly?
Hello, Catherine.
Hi.
My question was the following. There is no doubt that art in general can create connection between people. And sometimes it even has an added value by giving a certain clarity to the people around an ordinary discussion session. But how we as a mediator can convince parties or the disputant parties during the session that this kind of art-based methodology can have a certain advantages for this conflict resolution.
Yeah.
It might be a bit similar to what you have already spoken regarding the first question, but sometimes we face a rejection, and you answered this question.
Yeah.
But should we explain the advantages of such intervention as mediation?
Yeah. I think, especially people who are not used to doing this need a little bit of cognitive understanding in order to latch on and hook on. Mm-hmm. Depending on the audience that you have in front of you, it would be very beneficial to know them, to know their language, to know what sparks their interest. Mm-hmm. So for scientists that I work with a lot, I know that by nature, when you give them something to play with, they become curious. When you give them certain materials and you give them a task of see what the materials can do and how you can create a structure with it, they are becoming naturally curious about it. So know your audience and see what can hook their attention. That's the first recommendation. The second recommendation is give them a rationale. There's a wonderful book here, Your Brain on Art, by Susan McSalmon and Ivy Ross. There is a ton of studies in here that they did that describes the benefit of art making. One of them being it creates relaxation. It creates different stimuli of the brain. In mediation, it will help us to really bring in the difficult topics that are difficult to talk about, because we also know when the emotions are ranking too high, there's a certain point that we cannot mediate any longer and we need a break. We need to stop because nothing will come of it. People get stuck. And you can explain that to them. You can say through art making, these things are helped. We find an atmosphere and a room in which we can start to negotiate the pros and cons. Would you be interested in that? Would you be interested in creating a room with me like that, where you can then, settle in and be a little bit more relaxed? Because no one of us wants to suffer through stress for 3 hours, right? Something like that. I don't know. That's my way of phrasing it. But in here, you will have a lot of argumentation that can help you to rationalize why art making is beneficial. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you so much.
Oh, good. Yes.
I think we have one last question that we can get to. I'm so sorry if I'm not getting the name right, but Nauman, is that correct?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Catherine, for this wonderful session. My question is that in societies where there is this common tradition and culture that they share, I, as a student of peace and conflict studies, I just want to understand when there is these peace building activities that are going on in these troubled areas, and you identify that the cultures and tradition are common. So how can a mediator actually bring those parties together in that situation to let them know that your culture and tradition are already common? You just come and do these sort of activities. But the problem that arises in these sort of activities is that they think that it might deviate them from the conflict resolution process that they are already in that process. So how can a mediator actually share these sort of activities, art-based activities, or even cultural traditions which are common in those areas? So what is your take on that? Because at times there is a problem to actually let the people understand of their own tradition and how commonality is. So what is your take on that?
Yeah. Well, it's a very good and interesting question that I need to think about a little bit, because what I'm sometimes doing in mediation, I'm deviating a little bit away from the actual mediation process, that has a certain structure, into a more coaching related area where I say, before we begin the actual conflict enlightenment, let us first, gather some knowledge and some situation about, who are we, what cultures are we coming from, and can we maybe share that in this context? You speak about your folks and I speak about my folks, and we look at, is there anything that we believe the same or that we believe differently? Where do we come together and where do we differ? And once we have done that, maybe you can even bring artistic traditions into the room, because every culture, and this is the beauty of it, has their own traditions. Every culture has their own artistic expressions. There are certain dances in Germany that we do at certain times for certain reasons, and certain songs that we sing, and every culture has that. And when you take that as a basis and say, if we did a little bit of that, and we use that in order to begin our mediation process to establish a good atmosphere here, and to even maybe find already some solutions that might help us later on towards, creating options, then this could be really helpful. I don't know. So you have to probably deviate from the structured mediation process a little bit into first, doing some sort of a coaching analysis and seeing how can you bring these things in so that then you can go back to the mediation process. And that, of course, depends also on how much time you have, right? Because we don't always have 3 weeks. Sometimes it's just short. Yeah. Nauman, I'm not sure. Does that help? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Has any one of you, can I ask a question to the audience as a last thing? Has any one of you used creative methods before or something like that? Emiz? Yeah? What is your experiences with
not
it?
in mediation. I'm an art therapist, coach, supervisor, and starting up mediator. I'm not doing it yet, but I'm curious how I can combine, because I already use art in supervision and coaching.
Exactly. So then the step towards mediation is small, good. But Ole, you used things like that?
Catherine, actually, I would like to thank you a lot for this webinar. It's very interesting and extremely useful for me. And during listening to you, I understood how much helpful could be not only using of the art, but using of something like, I forgot the word. It's like projective methods.
Yes.
And actually, we created some table where are just letters, a lot of letters, just a square of letters, and where people can just look and find some emotions, which are there. And it works so good when people are closed and they say, I feel nothing. There are no emotions that I have now. Unfortunately, this table is only in Ukrainian, but I'm thinking about doing it in English because there is a need of this. So,
well, excellent. See, the principle is very similar to art making. You're starting to use the imagination, the association, and you're entering the realm of metaphor. And that's, the only part we're missing is the embodiment part, which I find is really helpful, using the whole body. But it's the same idea exactly. And it's so interesting how it really creates space and room for thinking, right?
Yeah, it breaks barriers, actually.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Very cool. Oh, I'm glad to hear that from you. Wonderful. Good. Yeah, I think we're running out of time a little bit, huh?
Yeah, but it was so great. I think it was a great discussion also at the end. And please feel free, I'm sure to reach out and to connect and continue these discussions for sure.
Please, I'm always open and really interested to hear from you and to, make a think tank on what can we do, what else can we do, how can we improve our processes and learn from each other. You can find me on LinkedIn, you can find me through the IM campus, right?
Yeah.
So don't hesitate to get in contact. I would love that. No, for sure. Please do. Please do. And maybe we can have a second
part of this webinar and yeah, continue the discussion and go deeper.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, everyone who came. Before leaving, I will give you the last words and also let you say bye.
Well, thank you. Yeah, well, I want to say that it's been really a pleasure. I was a little bit nervous, you know, beforehand, of course, but I'm really so happy that I feel like amongst colleagues, and let's be brave and bold and use things that really bring our humanness out. And I think we humans are art makers, we are creators. And if we help people to find that again, also, you know, to establish their creativity and fire that up, it helps in so many different contexts. So let's be brave with that and try all these methods. That's my last credo. Thank you for everything. And
beautiful last words.
Yay.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day, evening, night.
You too.
Bye.
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 Bye.